Let's pray to open this. Lord Jesus, we love you so much. We thank you for your plan for us. We thank you for your plan for your children as a group. Yes, you have a plan for us individually, but Lord, you also have a plan for us as your family. And we thank you for that. We thank you that there are portions of your plan that we really can only fully appreciate, that we can only enjoy as we gather together. And we thank you for that. I pray that you help us have a great time this morning as we get into your word. Help us have a great time, Lord, as we hear more about your intention for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Would you open with me to the book of Matthew, the first chapter. Second chapter. Matthew chapter 2. We just recently finished our series on Jesus being the friend of sinners. Jesus, the friend of sinners. It's kind of interesting that as we continue on, I think that whole concept of Jesus being a friend of sinners should actually affect how we view everything in our lives. I'm moving in a slightly different direction, but I think you'll see some correlation here. The title of my message today is Chasing Jesus, the Magi. Chasing Jesus, the Magi. Matthew chapter 2, starting in verse 1, it says, Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, Magi, some translations say wise men, from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. I think sometimes when we see people coming from a different place than where we are, we see people coming from a different place other than what our background is, our experiences are, our traditions are, sometimes we're kind of quick to pass judgment, aren't we? It's something that we're not familiar with, something that we haven't verified the accuracy of it for ourselves, we haven't verified how much truth there is, and we tend to pass judgment kind of quickly. You know, wise men from the east, Magi from the east. We don't really know anything about these people except for the fact that they were familiar enough with the stars to notice when something changed, to notice when something was different. We don't know, just looking at this opening scene of them, we don't know if they loved God, we don't know if they feared God, we don't know anything about Him except for the fact that a new star appeared and they were going to come check it out. Let's talk a little bit about Magi. Magi comes from the Greek word magos, and it's referring to those who are intellectual, sometimes referred to as sorcerers, sometimes referred to as, or I should say translated as, magicians. Other renderings are mage. The singular form of magi is actually magus or magus. It is an order, most theologians, most historians believe it is an order that when this came about, the order was already thousands of years old. It is an order that is believed to extend across nationalistic and political lines. There were many people that belonged to this order that were from all sorts of different nationalities, different countries, but they had something in common. They were trying to discover through creation, as we think of it, the created universe. Pockets of them existed, some fairly large, all across the known world. Many historians think they were a monk-like order, much of their teaching based actually on Semitic beliefs. Much of their teaching was based on a monotheistic idea. Their purpose as philosophers was to study the created universe through discovery, research, and education of many plants, animal, geological, and astronomical sciences. Such knowledge, as you begin to discover things, can actually appear magical. When you think of some of have you seen some chemists as they're performing experiments and they start to combine different elements, they start to combine different minerals, and sometimes some pretty incredible things start happening. Think of a culture that had absolutely no idea of chemistry or any of those kind of sciences. If they saw people that were learned in this way, that were educated in this way, that started performing some of these experiments, so to speak, it would look quite magical. There's a quote I heard. It says, "Magic is just science that has not yet been discovered." Most of what we see has a scientific explanation behind it. Obviously, we know that there is a supernatural. There is a supernatural world. We serve a supernatural creator. And when Jesus came, some of the signs that he performed were to testify to that. He was from God. But there are a lot of these magi, magicians, that went through the world and they did what we would think of as signs, except for the fact that it was just science, that people didn't know about it. As is true of virtually any group, some of them truly were using the intellect to try to discover truth, to try to figure out what was true and what was not true. But then as you have people who have honorable intentions, honorable ideas, honorable motivations, you also have those who don't have honorable motivations. Sometimes, as you start to see the Greek and Roman philosophers, their intention was to actually try to uncover the futility of life. In fact, if you look at King Solomon, the wisest person to ever live, the book of Ecclesiastes, what he states in various ways from various perspectives all throughout this book is that life without God has no meaning. Life without God is empty. And we can believe that, and we can hold on that, and we can say amen to that. Life without God has no purpose. But then you have a philosopher who doesn't believe in the existence of God. And they take that same theme and they twist it slightly to simply say life itself has no meaning. Life itself has no purpose. Life itself is empty. This humanistic philosophy that causes people to believe that the only thing that makes life worth living is what you can grab onto today. That is the only worth, that is the only value that you can possibly have in life, because there is nothing after here. There is nothing after now. So you can understand there is a correlation with these ideas, with these schools of thought, except for the fact that a philosopher who believes in God, believes in that life that has no meaning, suddenly, when you spend a life seeking after God and learning about God, there's unlimited meaning, there's unlimited purpose, there's unlimited potential. As we look through the Bible, we can actually see historical figures of people that were quite possibly part of this work. All the way back in Egypt, when the Israelites were there and Moses came, 2 people opposed him. 2 people in Pharaoh's court referred to as his magicians. And as Moses started to perform certain signs, these magicians were able to do some of them because some of them could be reproduced in scientific ways. Some of the signs that Moses performed, they were able to duplicate in a non-supernatural method. That was why God provided such a diversity in the signs that he brought, because it came to a certain point in time which the 2 magicians, as they were referred to as, could not duplicate what Moses was doing, couldn't follow suit, couldn't do what he was doing, and finally they just stopped and said, okay, this is God. We can't keep up here. We can't keep doing this. This is God. A little later on, we have the prophet Balaam in the book of Numbers. Quite a few theologians believe he was a magi. He was one of this group of people. One of the ones who was not necessarily true to the idea of monotheistic God, true to the idea of uncovering truth. The fact was, in Numbers, when Balak, the king, came to him to try to curse the Israelites, he was known as a prophet, but as this story unfolds, it becomes clear that this is the first time God, the true God, had ever actually talked with him. So he brought other prophecies before, he brought other words before, but not from the one true God. Which is kind of an interesting idea, isn't it? The idea that God could use someone who would not set aside themselves to wholly seek after God, still use them to do His purpose, still use them to bring His word. In fact, as you start to look at these wise men, these Magi, in the book of Matthew, they say something interesting. So where is he, verse 2, who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east. How did they know to look for a star? How did they know that a star was going to rise to herald the birth of a new king? Well, in Numbers chapter 24. As Balaam was prophesying about the kingdom of Israel, he suddenly has this momentary revelation. A messianic revelation. And he says this, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. Meaning, I see him, but he's coming, but he's not here yet. A star shall come forth from Jacob. A scepter shall rise from Israel. That is a prophecy of a coming king. That is a prophecy of a king that would be heralded by a star. Chances are they were very familiar with that prophecy. Later on in the book of Daniel, we see that he was taken to Babylon, and there was an entire group of what they refer to as magicians or Chaldeans that quite probably were Magi, were part of this order. And as Daniel was worshiping the one true God, and he was bringing true prophetic revelation, he also had messianic prophecies come about. Chances are, because of the familiarity, as I already stated, the familiarity of the Semitic teachings, the Semitic culture, the wise men were very aware of most of the prophetic books that we have in our Bible. And I don't know if you're aware of this, there are over 350 messianic prophecies going through the Old Testament. Starting as early as Genesis chapter 3, when God tells them that He is going to have His anointed one come and crush the serpent's head, crush the serpent's authority, all the way through till Malachi, when He's talking about the anointed one that was soon be coming. God was telling His people all through the Old Testament that the Messiah, the anointed one, was coming. This was not something that was done in secret. This was not something that was done in private. And it was quite probable that this Magi, this order of philosophers, even theologians, knew about this coming king. And when they saw the star appear, they knew it was time before Israel did. So they show up. They're talking to King Herod. This is what's interesting, is that this is happening in Herod's backyard, and Herod doesn't have any idea what's going on. Herod doesn't have a clue. Herod was not a God-fearing man, a God-fearing king whatsoever. And he sees these people approaching. Now Herod, being a ruler of the day, he knew all about Magi. He knew all about this order. He knew all about this class. He knew that they were very learned. He knew that they were very educated. He knew that most kings who were established had these type of counselors. No doubt when Magi came to see him, he probably felt pretty honored that they were there. Chances are this was a very publicized event when these Magi came into his presence. Traditionally, we've kind of, as we have learned about Magi, we teach about Magi, the tradition of the wise men is that there were 3. The only reason that we get that is because there were actually 3 gifts that they brought. Most theologians believe there's actually somewhere between a dozen and possibly even as many as 30. So they were traveling in a caravan. They were traveling in a group. And as they came in here, it was a well-noticed, well-publicized event. They came into Herod's presence, and they said, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" King of the Jews. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Rome, but they did not take lightly the idea that a territory that they ruled, a territory that they viewed as owning, suddenly would have its own king. That's a problem. And it says this, verse 3, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him.